Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Black Girl Joy. And this episode is the very definition of Black girl magic because we talked about finding the you, right? Finding the true you last week. But in order for you to start and continue and be successful at that journey, you also need to heal you. And so I have the one and only, the amazing, the honorable, the fly is crap, Chalice Nelson joining us. And I'm going to introduce you to her right now.
Hello, hello. How are
Hi.
you?
Hi. So Chalice is a licensed therapist, and I'll let Chalice, why don't you give us a rundown on what you do?
Yes, I am a licensed professional counselor in the Atlanta area, and I have a boutique virtual private practice where I serve creatives in transitioning from dreamers to doers.
Oh, I love that. From dreamers to doers. I love that. And so you're going to talk with us today about healing through creativity. And so I love that you have chosen that as a specialty area and a niche and a, a different way to think about the healing process. So I guess before we get started, I would like to talk about what is healing because I think there's some misunderstanding around healing. Sometimes people feel like they heal when they ignore. Sometimes you heal when you suppress. You heal when you lash out, right? You like so there's so many different or when you compartmentalize. People are like, "Oh no, I'm good. I'm done with that. I'm healed. I've moved on." But have you really? So can you as a licensed therapist, as a professional, define what healing means?
Yes, so if we go to just the basic definition of what healing means, it is to become healthy again. It is to alleviate distress. And I think that, as you mentioned, everyone has their own definition of what healing is and what it looks like for them. For me, I believe that it is a process of evolving to fall deeper in love with yourself. And I know that the concept of healing can be extremely tricky because evolution within itself is constant. Yet at the same time, if you find that you're constantly on this journey of needing to heal, you're trying to constantly delve into the different intricacies of your life, that's exhausting. Like, that doesn't make life worth living if you're always looking at what you need to do. And I think that pulls you away from the present moment of all the work that you've been able to do to get to where you are. So a starting point of like when you would know you need to heal is really just looking at your life and determining of the things that you are unhappy with. What aspects of your life have to deal with you? How does it impact how you're showing up in the world?
All right. So you take healing and then you integrate creativity. And similar to what I asked you
Mhm.
about healing, creativity can sometimes sound like, oh, an artist, a vocal artist, a visual
Mhm.
artist, a graphic designer. What do you mean when you say healing through creativity?
I believe that creativity is a life force. It is what helps us to be able to navigate this world that we're in. And creativity is a basic skill that is necessary for life. So it's ultimately about being able to make effective decisions, to be able to resolve problems. And we do that day to day in our lives, and we're determining what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, how are we going to respond to something that is bringing up emotion for us. And so, in working specifically with creatives, one of the things that I like to focus on is like, okay, this is how you show up in the world. So like, how can you hone into the sacredness of creativity to create the life that you desire for yourself?
Okay. All right. So, what are some ways as a therapist? Actually, I want to back up.
Hmm.
What are some barriers to healing?
Barriers to healing, awareness,
Mm,
right? Because just like as you mentioned, some people think lashing out is healing. Some people think, not being cognizant of their tone when they speak to people is healing as long as they got the message out. Some people think suppression is a way of healing. So it's really looking within yourself and asking what creates that comfort for you to live life the way that you do, despite there might be aspects of unhappiness there. So I think that that's a barrier. When it comes to the field of mental health, you know, the continued need for there to be decolonization surrounding mental health, and what that looks like, that oftentimes can serve as a barrier as well, where, people are hesitant to go because what does this diagnosis mean? How am I going to be perceived? Or, simply just not being ready.
mm. Is there a such thing as almost like making a home and getting comfortable in your trauma or in your experiences that haven't been healed? Almost like you make a little home and you just curl up in a blanket in it and you never really deal with it?
Yes, because in trauma, there's two different ways in which there can be a detachment from the world. Depersonalization, where it's like, I don't know what my emotions are. I'm navigating through this world as is. I don't need emotions. I don't need people. I just kind of see life happening as it is. And then there's derealization, where the world around you, it feels like it doesn't even exist. So when we speak specifically about trauma and trauma related disorders, um, it's your brain's way of protecting you to create
Mm.
that comfort within your home of like, well, you've dealt with some things that you shouldn't have had to. But since you've dealt with those things, how can you keep yourself safe now? And sometimes it does feel a lot more comfortable and a lot easier to kind of stay in your home versus see what's surrounding you and the beauty that you can take in that supports you within your healing process.
And so I have a question because I love to talk about this topic and you kind of hit on it just then. It's that isolation, right? And it's almost like I'm wondering what is a driver for that? Is it society teaching us that we're individuals? Is it don't don't kill me? I would say don't kill me Christians, but is it the church saying just go to God with your problems and everything will be washed away? Is it us not wanting to go to other people and feel like a burden? And maybe it's all of these, a little bit of all of these things, and not wanting the criticism as well. Do you think that's what, like, those forces is what creates isolation, which actually kind of makes the problem worse?
I think that those forces might be like the secondary issue.
Hmm.
Ultimately, I think it comes down to our thoughts.
Mm,
You live with you day in and day out. So if you're having the thoughts like, I'm not deserving of having people around me, or I can't build healthy relationships, or I'm never going to be able to achieve my dreams, it may feel easier for you to withdraw and isolate. And then when you have messages on top of that that affirm those negative beliefs that you have, it makes it justifiable to withdraw and isolate.
and so Grace made a good point. I hid myself emotionally for a while, didn't want to feel anything. That I
Mm-hmm.
would rather be numb than have to feel the pain or have to
Mm-hmm.
feel the rejection or whatever it is I'm feeling. Is that common?
Depending on what a person is faced with,
Hmm.
that could be when we're talking about trauma related disorders. That is a common response, that numbness. that can come from dissociation. So it's like you don't even know what's happening in the present moment because you're still reliving the traumas that you experienced.
Gotcha. And then Maybelline, I'm hoping I'm saying it right. Maybelline said isolation. Let me put it up. Isolation also brings the feeling of some control. And that's such a good point because
Mm.
when me personally going through my own stuff, when I isolate, for one, I don't have to deal with other people's stuff, right? And I feel like I have enough stuff to deal with. But it's also like I can control what I do, when I do, what I have to respond to, what I don't have to respond to, as long as I'm hidden in my little corner. So how does what role does control play in healing?
I think that is a very challenging question to
Mhm.
answer because, to some extent, the reason why we engage in any type of behavior is because it offers us comfort in some
Mm,
way, shape, or form, right? So to isolate and have that sense of control is granting you some comfort that you don't have to face some of the challenges that you're dealing with. So I believe there has to be like a great understanding for yourself as an individual of the difference between control and power. And so I like to look at control as, you know, fixing everything around you to work in a way where you know you can handle it.
mm.
Power is more so understanding that you can allow things to flow effortlessly because within you, you can navigate it all.
Ooh. So control is more external, power more internal?
I would say so.
Internally focused?
Yes.
Never thought about it.
Hmm.
Never thought about that. So knowing that you have the power to handle whatever's going on around you versus trying to manipulate and adjust and control people, places, things, which ultimately causes you more disappointment.
Yes.
Let's be real. And you get further down in the hole because you're like, they won't do what I want them to do. Walk around
Mhm.
mad.
Mhm.
So then that control ultimately feeds back into whatever feelings we're having, probably a sense of being out of control.
Yes. So you can end up
Oh,
in a cycle, but it's a survival tool. Like sometimes people feel as though they literally don't have the time to connect with those emotions and establish that sense of power because the reality is that life goes on regardless of what you've gone through.
so what do you mean when you say connect with those emotions? I think we say things like that and people feel like, oh, it's all like, touchy feely. Connect with your emotions. Like, I don't want to connect with
Hmm.
them. They make me angry. They make me sad. What does it mean to really connect with your, like, literally, like in a literal sense, not theoretically? What does it mean to
Hmm.
connect with your emotions?
To allow yourself to feel whatever it is you're trying to run away from.
Mm,
So it is literally acknowledging the mind body connection because oftentimes, with any emotion that we feel, we know what it feels like within our body. When we start to try to create distance between what our body feels and how we want our mind to behave, that's where that disconnection occurs.
mm. And then what happens when you prolong that?
I think it's the ground for lying to yourself,
Mm.
and then you have to deal with the consequences of not being integral to yourself. And you have to understand how that may in turn impact how you're showing up in the world.
Whew. All right. Okay, so we talked a lot about trauma. Now let's talk about and the healing, right? So how do you heal through creativity?
I think that journey is different for every single individual. For myself, within the therapeutic process, depending on the type of client that I'm working with. If I'm working with a client who already has honed in on their artistic creative ability, I really begin to explore how can those same skill sets be used in real life situations. And then for those who may question, like, am I even creative? I don't view myself as creative. I really start to hone in on those moments in life where they are being creative,
Mm,
because there is that misconception that, to be creative means that you have to know how to paint, you have to know how to sing, you have to know how to dance. But really just kind of understanding, like, sometimes creativity is shown up in the way you are intentional within your relationship, how present you are with yourself, um, the ways in which you navigate adversity and still achieve your goals. That's creativity as well.
all right. So give me a sample activity. I'm working on building self-esteem. I'm trying to heal internally those negative thoughts and thought distortions in my brain. What types of activities do you give your clients?
Well, I guess let me ask you this: proposed client, do they define themselves as creative already, or do they not?
Ooh, I'm talking about myself, but this is not therapy, guys. This is just this is just a demonstration. So I would consider myself, this is okay. This is a whole nother story. So I'm not going to go in a
Mm-hmm.
rabbit hole. So I consider myself creative, but in the aspect that I'm very, very logical, right? My strength is to
Mm-hmm.
be logical, but I enjoy being creative. So I'm not like a master at anything creative, but I enjoy the arts, if that makes sense. And
Okay,
with
it
I'm
does.
good at them.
Yes, it does. Okay, so here is a sample activity of what I would do with a client experiencing those same challenges.
Mhm.
One is I would connect with what art form you feel most gravitated towards.
Okay.
And so, based upon that, that's how I'm going to iron out what that activity is going to look like. Let's say, for example, this client is really into music. Um, Life stories play a significant role in how we're able to view ourselves. I honestly hate that the term is self esteem because it's built in community. Like, there's no way for you to know who you are, and how you show up in the world if there aren't people to mirror that behavior for you, or hold a mirror up for you to see that behavior for you to decide it. So, in the midst of listening to your life story, maybe we develop like a mood chart. And so maybe different colors or different songs coordinate to how you're feeling during on a certain day. And so if you're having a really rough day where you're having a difficult time seeing yourself, all of these songs may reflect some form of an affirmation for you to reflect on, because music is what you gravitate towards.
Mhm.
And if you have songs that, when you listen to them, they have a sense of nostalgia, positive nostalgia, or they even just uplift you, then that would be an effective tool.
I love that. So I did that the other day. When I'm angry, sometimes I was listening to Lil Wayne, and that's how you let the
Okay.
beat build. So I was doing that the other day on repeat. I was like, so we have a
Yeah.
really good question in the chat. I want to ask you, does
Okay.
creativity serve as a release of emotions or a distraction from a situation or both? And I think the answer is it depends, but I'm going to leave that to the specialist, to the expert.
Okay. Maybelline, I really love that question. And it is a release of emotion. I don't view it as a distraction, because words don't always define what it is that we feel. So when we're
Mm,
able to engage in creativity from an artistic point of view, it allows us to sort through what those emotions are that maybe we don't have words for. And I hope that when it is actively engaged, that it offers some level of catharsis where you feel some relief. But what creativity also does is that it encourages the use of all of your senses.
Mm,
So it's not just seeing, talking about something. Maybe you are moving, you're using your hands, you're touching on things, you're smelling things, you're listening. And with that, that brings about healing because, specifically speaking, in regard to trauma related disorders, trauma gets stored in different parts of our bodies. When we talk about anxiety and stress, stress gets stored in different parts of our bodies, and you can talk about it all the time. But for some people, being able to move your hips, which is an area where a lot of stress is stored, there's so much release that comes in that you speaking about that doesn't necessarily mean you be able to reap the same benefit.
and so I want to draw a distinction, which is why I said it could be both, because what Shalise is talking about is intentional, right? Versus
Mm-hmm.
like, are you just being creative, like throwing a bunch of activities at yourself to distract yourself? And so I don't know if that's what
Mm-hmm.
Maybelline was getting at, but that's kind of what I got from it was, yeah, if you're being intentional, like I'm expressing something through this, then you're healing. But if you're just like some of us do create distractions and I'm gonna fill up my schedule, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm not gonna think about what I'm going through, then that could serve as a distraction. So I really think it depends on your intention.
Yes, and I would say that creativity is intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you don't have a specific
Mm,
goal out of what it is that you're trying to create, you are being intentional within that work. When you busy yourself with a variety of different, like, creative activities, whatever creativity may mean, um, that's not being intentional. That's not being mindful. That's not being fully immersed within your process, to really be able to connect with what it is that you're feeling and how to release that.
mm. So I've shared this before, a little anecdote. Everyone who's probably ever watched knows that my mom passed with ALS. And so I was in therapy. I am a big advocate of therapy. I think I say it every time I'm on here. So if you need therapy, depending on your level of like where you are, you may need therapy and that's fine. We encourage that here.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I did outside of my therapy was I found ways to grieve my mom through creativity. And I still grieve her every day. But an example would be I would go make pieces for her grave. And I would sit out there and I would decorate her grave. And that was part of my process. And it was just something I did. So I would actually make pieces to go at her grave. And that was part of Mother's Day, Christmas. I would make different pieces for different seasons. Easter had like a little string of Easter eggs, right? So that was part of my healing process. And I guess I say that because everyone is going to look different, right? I may not be painting or writing a song, but I'm going out and I'm facing, right, when I'm grieving and I'm sitting out there and I'm being creative. I have even eaten birthday cake on her birthday at her grave, but it's just kind of my way of grieving. And so I guess I say that, like I said, to say grief or healing will look different. It doesn't have to be like a regiment. It doesn't have to be like very strict or a certain method or model, but it's all about that expression, I think, Shalise, right?
Yes, and I think that's a beautiful way to tap into creativity and allow yourself to grieve, right? It's creating a connection between you and your mom that, despite, earthside or in heaven, that you two remain tethered to one another. And it demonstrates the level of intention with that. I think that you also hit on something that's very important too, is like understanding the difference between crafting and being creative.
Mm,
Because oftentimes people think like, oh, well, I made something that makes me creative. But what did you do to make that thing better? What did you just copy the process and make it for yourself, or did you engage your own thought processes into
mhm.
that?
Interesting. So why is are you saying creativity and being more of an active participant in the process is better than crafting?
Crafting in itself is a hobby and can be enjoyable. It's not the same as creativity.
Ooh.
And that's oftentimes like a misconception. You know, people will say like, "Oh, well, I bake or I sing. I'm creative." Okay, but are you just mimicking what was given to you? Where you did you get a recipe and it's been passed down for generations and you're still using that same recipe? Did you explore how you can make that recipe better? That
Mm.
is being creative within itself. It's really understanding like how can you continuously evolve. That's that healing component of it.
All right. So, Shalice, what is your message for the world? Broad question.
Yes. Huh, give me a moment. I gotta think about that.
Mm.
Hmm. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna full copyright it right now because I haven't put it on my website yet. I would say make life your greatest piece of artwork.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. All right, guys. So Shalice is the creative therapist, the creative therapist. So I want you all to connect with her. Shalice, tell us more.
Yes, if you are on social media platforms, you can find me at Chalice Nelson LPC on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. I do my best to post on YouTube videos regarding my own creative process. I share the scientific backing behind creativity and why it's helpful. I offer a variety of different mindfulness activities for you to engage in. And then I also have crafting activities that you can engage in to offer you healing and give you a free canvas to make it your own so that you're being creative as well.
Awesome. All right, Shalice. So as we get ready to head out, I have one small topic. We're both
Okay.
parents.
Yes.
How can creativity help parents with parenting? Because I'm struggling.
Yes. It's a little topic with like so many aspects to it, right? So many dimensions. I think that parenting plays a role in whether your child is able to understand their creative abilities or if it gets shut down.
Mm,
And I think about that in the way that even as adults, when we look at people who live their lives one way, and then when they're around their parents, you're like, is this the same person? Right? There's that fear there of being your true, authentic self. And I think that there is a correlation between being creative, being authentic, and being able to experience a life of liberation. And when, as parents, we we say to do things without explanation or we correct behavior without our children being able to understand why that behavior may not serve them or the people around them well, we are shutting out their creative abilities. We aren't really fostering their ability to broaden their perspective and to determine how things work. When we stick to the vision that we have for our children and we don't listen to what it is that they desire for themselves, we pull away from their creativity. And so, in being a parent and tapping into creativity, it requires you to be intentional with your parenting and trust that whatever is the way that you see best fit for your child, regardless of, what our elders try to tell us, what social media tries to tell us about how to parent now. When you truly grant yourself the ability to connect with your child and understand what it is that they need and you foster that, You are fostering creativity. You are fostering their independence. You are fostering their ability to not be codependent on you and to thrive.
All right, ma'am. Well, thank you, Chalice, for coming on. Everyone, I'm going to throw her information back up there. Please go like, share, subscribe to Chalice in all the places and all the ways so that we can get her message out there and really start healing our community. At the same time, please like, share, and subscribe this podcast. We're trying to come up, y'all. So I appreciate you joining in, Miss Maybelline and Grace and Billy. Thanks for commenting. I will. Ooh, next week. Next week we're talking about living in your moment. We'll have Miss Maria on, and she's gonna join us about to talk about living in your moment, not someone else's moment, not mama moment, not the child, our helicopter parents, not your child moment, but living, really creating your own moment and living in it. So I hope you join us next week at our regular time at 6:30. Thank you for joining us a little late today. And bye, everyone. See you
Thank
later.
you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Shalise.